We're back. Season 7, Episode 26, The Pony of Shadows, The Shadow Play, Part 87, The Extra Rejuvenation of Revengeance. This is... do I need to explain which episode? This is the second part of the Pony of Shadows episode. Okay, there. We got the summary out of the way. The animation continues to be incredibly awesome with the pony, with the Venom Pony. Let's just call him what he is here. Good lord, they do such incredible stuff with this. He also is smart in how he acts. It's almost like he's more of a tactical thinker, someone who will think his way through a situation rather than having power or magic or flight or whatever to be able to defeat it. Interesting. Either way, what he does is he destroys Pwnhenge, the magnifier they used in order to try and, steal him away back in the day. So, now I'm going to say something that's going to piss at least 2 people off in chat right now. I like how Twilight was not able to brute force defeat the Pony of Shadows in a beam war, but Twilight and Starlight were. Because that makes sense, because Starlight is stronger. This is also a weakened Pony of Shadows, as he himself mentioned. But, Anyways. So, then we cut to Star Swirl, who is immediately a dick. Just like that, right off the bat, right? Just, hey, I'm an asshole. His first lines out of his freaking gob. Hi, Baron. Pinky then rattles off a list of all the crap that's happened over the course of the show, which is a nice little touch. Because it's not just a continuity counter kind of thing. Oh yeah, speaking of, let's just get the arc counter out of the way. Obviously, this episode gets an arc counter. This is a big arc counter. I do have one continuity counter I want to give this episode. We'll cover it later, don't worry. See if you can guess it before we get there. So Pinky rattles off all this stuff. That's cool. Rehashing is cool. There's actually a real reason for doing this, narratively speaking. Because it helps to emphasize 2 points, one of which I'll be building onto later, but the other is that the pillars get the idea very quickly that what they're dealing with is modern heroes. They get the impression and concept that the main 6 are the modern equivalent of them, which they are, obviously. So it's a quick and easy way to be like, oh, so you're the ones who carried up our legacy. Cool. By the way, I actually mentioned this in my note 3 times. I love how Flash and Rainbow just immediately gel. Anyone else catch that? Like, the second they have any screen time, which is literally their first scene where the two are there, they're just like, oh, cool! Just immediately. I love that. Yeah, just the bro, which they do like twice throughout the episode. Anyways. So. I touched on this already, but the connections here are fairly self-apparent. And yet another example of how the pattern propagates, which I've talked about so much. Some of you may know that I talked about and started really discussing the idea and concept of the pattern, aka the concepts of harmony, back in, I want to say, Season 5, I think it was. But after watching this episode, this was just another magnifier for my theory. At this point, I think I can officially say the pattern is not a theory, it's a thing. The pattern is my term, but the concept absolutely exists within the show. Back in the day, people who were powerful wove a physical manifestation of a metaphysical concept. That metaphysical concept then physically manifested into a tree, which was now both literal and metaphorical. Right? Like, the tree then became both a literal physical thing, it's right there, you can touch it, but also something that was connected to the concept that birthed it, the pattern, the very idea of harmony, is the word they use in the show. The connections between people, friendship, acknowledgement, respect, mutual cooperation, etc. Whatever you want to call it, I call it the pattern. That tree physically manifests that metaphysical concept. This is how the map functions. Right? This is how the map operates, and including in this very episode. This is also why I've been talking about the pattern for 7 seasons of this stuff. Side note, anybody else notice that Pinky was connected to a Pegasus and Fluttershy was connected to an Earth Pony? I wonder if there was something deliberately done with that. Anyways. So each of the pillars clearly gels. I'm going to kind of read from my notes here because I want to make this point very clearly. Each of the pillars clearly gels with their respective main six very well, except for Star Swirl and Twilight. Go figure. This also makes perfect sense because this also helps to explain part of the reason why the pattern itself and harmony has taken so long to properly propagate. Because Star Swirl didn't fit in the pattern. He was not harmonious. Now hang on. The very concept of harmony, the very concept of this, that might explain it, Vigilant, of the pattern of harmony didn't exist back then. We get an insight into Mr. Red and how horrible he was back then. Sorry, into Equestria and how horrible it was back then. Because we literally see insight into the kind of terrors and kind of... Yeah, back when it was called the Realm instead of Equestria. The pattern hadn't propagated yet. It was a dangerous and terrifying place with daily dangers. We see a literal example of this. I'm skipping ahead of my notes a little bit. When we see the sirens who send out their siren call, which does the opposite of harmony. It deliberately causes things to go against each other, to fight each other, and in the process they show this. This is wonderful showing, not telling, by the way. They actually consume the disharmony. They feed off of it. Now I want you to think about that. There was a creature type that existed back then that could feed off of disharmony. So we combine, and we only have to go with 2 deep here. There's plenty of other examples, but we only have to go 2 deep to really emphasize this point. Wendigos and sirens. 2 creatures that are at their strongest and like to spread and be horrible and evil and awful through disharmony. And as we've discussed many times, discord is not disharmonious, ironically. Discord fits in the pattern just fine. This is actual disharmony. This is messed up stuff. And that's what it was like back then. Now, so the pattern didn't exist and Star Swirl didn't fit, sure, and he's an asshole. Let's just go ahead and say that. Star Swirl's a dick. He violates Rule 0. I hate myself for making this comparison here. But it's easy to see why he's such a dick. Because he is results-oriented, goal-focused, entirely... He's working in a hostile environment, trying to tame the realm. Trying to tame it into what would eventually be Equestria. Yeah, he is cold calculus to a T. And by many accounts, he had to be. Because the pattern hadn't propagated to the point where people could reach out in friendship, where people could connect with each other and solve things in a more peaceful thing. And yeah, as Weods points out, and as we've seen, and we'll see in the movie, which happens right after this, the world is still dangerous outside of this area where the pattern has propagated, right? I keep saying propagated. I feel like it's spread. So he's an asshole who is results-oriented, who's focused on his goal, and who wouldn't consider anything that isn't a waste of his time to be anything other than a waste of his time. So naturally, Starlight is the one who tries to come up with the non-banishing answer. That makes perfect sense, because she herself is someone who has benefited from a non-banishing answer. So, yeah, of course she would try to actually, reach for an idea that doesn't involve what almost happened to her. Twilight doesn't even consider it, which makes perfect sense, because Star Swirl has said twice now, Star Swirl has said banishment is the only answer. Therefore, in Twilight's mind, banishment is the only answer. She's even hesitant about it, but she absolutely goes along with it because... Let me share a story really quick before I continue talking about Star Swirl. When I was younger... Hi, Evo. When I was younger, I've said this before. I used to assume that mistakes or flaws in like an episode of television or a movie were my fault. That there was something I was doing wrong and not understanding. Now, hear me out. Hang on. The reason I assumed that was because I was not stupid. I was stupid for other reasons, but because I understood that a lot of people who are experienced people, who have lots of work and craft, who have been doing this for a long time, put together a lot of work and effort to make this. If I, a dumb kid, can immediately point out that flaw, then surely one of the hundreds of people who worked on that work could too. And there's just a logic to that, isn't there? Obviously they know better than me. I'm just a dumb kid. How can I possibly be pointing out these flaws that they obviously would have noticed? So clearly I'm just getting it wrong. I imagine a lot of you have been through that little revelation at least at one point in your life, because I remember the first time I realized, oh. Now granted, I've always been kind of a question authority thing, like that's been my thing since I was very, very young. But I bring that specific story up because it's the same mentality. Of course Star Swirl knows what he's talking about. He's older, he's more experienced. Most of magic was literally built on the backs of his research. He and the Pillars literally helped build Equestria. Of course he's more experienced, and of course he knows what he's talking about. Why should Twilight question this? And Sunburst. Sunburst doesn't get as much screen time, really, but you get my point. Starlight, well, she's always been kind of a challenge questioning kind of a person, so naturally she brings this up. But again, she has a very personal reason to do so. She has literally been, not a victim, but a beneficiary of the opposite mentality. So then this, hang on, I'm building up to a point here. This explains so well everything going on here and everything about Star Swirl and why he's a dick. It's because friendship being a waste of time is an outdated concept, but was arguably true back then. I say arguably because this is actually a bit of a gradient. Let me use a real-life parallel. How useful is art to a bunch of people roaming the plains trying to survive by hunting and gathering? You probably see where I'm taking this. Because the answer is, of course it's useful, and of course it's not useful. Does it feed those people? No. But art can be used to notate things, to develop ideas, to share ideas, to mark certain locations. Art can improve morale. It can give you something to do when you have nothing else to do. Keep the brain occupied, keep the brain entertained, keep the brain happy. Art doesn't get you dinner, but still has a purpose, but you can see why it's less of a priority. Same thing with friendship in this setup. Star Swirl back in the day could easily and absolutely say that friendship is a waste of time because it doesn't defeat their enemies and it doesn't save these people and it doesn't put food in their bellies. But you can also see how he is, while both being correct, is also incorrect because everything I just said. Everything I just enunciated upon. Right? And so he isn't wrong so much as he is not quite incorrect. Now, the episode even makes this very clear that he is out of date and operating on an out-of-date note. How many of you even caught this? I'm actually curious, because I never caught this before. I've seen this episode several times. The episode makes it clear that he is running on out-of-date information regarding how friendship works, because he's like, go to these dark places of the world which aren't anymore. The episode literally shows that he's running on out-of-date information. I cannot believe I never caught that before. Yeah, he goes down to Times Square, for God's sakes. By the way, funny. So, this makes so much sense and makes all of this line up perfectly. His information is out of date, not just because of his logic, because the very nature of how people function and coexist has changed. I thought of a parallel to use here. I'm still debating if I should. So I don't have one of these personally. I'm going to go ahead and use the parallel. I might get he's a racist grandpa. Think about it. I don't have one of those, thankfully. I don't know if any of you do. Completely out of date. Completely out of touch with the times. No idea how things operate anymore. Think about it. Anyways. So, and then Rainbow shares some apple cider with Flash. So I think Sean guessed this earlier. That's the continuity. I'm absolutely giving a continuity counter for that. Because Rainbow and her love of the apple cider and deciding to share that with her hero, who she immediately gets along with, that's awesome. So, plus the continuity for the fact that she bothered. It's even got the apple sign up, just so you know that that's the apple cider. That's awesome. What are the sirens? I don't know. I'm sorry. I can't speak to that because I haven't seen that show. Or whatever they're from. Are they from a comic? Anyways. I know what the sirens are, the giant flying creatures. What are they from? Oh, they're from the movie? Where were they in the movie? I don't remember them being in the movie. Oh, gotcha. Okay, we're cool. We're cool. No continuity for that. It is a great scene, though. So, this... oh, I gotta scroll up a bit. Sorry, I've just been smashing through these points here. I have a lot of notes for this episode. So Rainbow... So Twilight comes up with a spell. Star Swirl doesn't even look at the spell, because this isn't the time to risk on half-baked spells. He's a dick, but you can see his point. I just keep emphasizing this point. The episode's going to keep hammering this point in most of the episode. Star Swirl is not evil, right? He's not acting from a place of malice. He is a dick who has a point. Now, his point is out of date and basically wrong at this point, but you can see why he is acting the way he is. He is not just acting this way because he's an asshole or because he's, you know, frickin' Ambassador Udina or whatever. there's a Jellicoe. That's a good example, Sean. Once again, we'll tie this into Star Trek. He is a Jellicoe. Captain Jellicoe from Star Trek TNG. He's a dick, but he is a dick with a point, and he is a dick for a reason. I still would rather shoot myself than serve under him, and I would absolutely not get along with Star Swirl. But you could see how that is different from someone who is just plain an asshole. You remember, let's use another Star Trek comparison. You remember the one jackass in Redemption Part 2 who was questioning Data's orders? That guy didn't have a point. He was just an asshole. His character began and ended with the word dick. Like, he was just a dick, nothing else. Jellicoe at least has that extra layer of reason and purpose behind him, and I do tend to prefer that when it comes to fiction. Same thing with Star Swirl. So, I should probably mention... Oh, absolutely, Trey Hexia. I should probably mention this. Weouds just got here. So, the other main six stand up for Twilight. Cool. And as they're doing so, they mention something which I actually feel is a bit of a missed opportunity. Star Swirl doesn't even react to the fact that Twilight finished his spell that he was unable to finish because he was unable to conceive of friendship. Remember, that was all the way back in Magical Mystery Cure. Celestia actually did say that, so this is fully in character, going back 4 seasons. But they all stand up for him, and he has no reaction to her not only completing his spell, but becoming an alicorn. Although it's funny I bring that up, because he apparently was studying researching a spell to turn someone into an alicorn. But he couldn't figure it out because he didn't have the pattern, he didn't have the friendship. Remember that. Anywho, so the map connected to the pillars and the main and harmony as a very concept naturally immediately identifies where the Pony of Shadows is, because, well, this is a friendship problem. But you'll notice how I'm sorry, I skipped over a step there. he is still just kind of like, until his own fellow pillars, I forget which one, I think it was Meadowbrook, looks at the spell and says, this looks like a pretty good spell. And instantly he's like, oh, okay, well, I'll go ahead and listen to it then, because you say it and you're actually worth my time. Again, dick move, but understandable. After all, he doesn't know these new people. He knows Meadowbrook. He knows her quite well. Like that's someone he can say is a proven variable. So if she says it's worth something, it's probably worth something. So he instantly and without hesitation starts looking into the spell and changes his plans to use Twilight's spell and starts being more positively inclined towards Twilight pretty much from this point onwards. So just immediate shift in mentality because of the fact that one of his fellow pillars spoke up. Yeah, all of that tracks. All of that makes sense. So this is when Rainbow's like, hang on, the last time the thing called us here was to go deal with a supervillain. Sorry, Starlight. Starlight raises the eyebrow, which actually got a smile out of me. Yeah, once again, Spike is awesome. Go figure, right? So, Star Swirl says, I sincerely doubt we can save our homeland with a conversation. That line says everything it needs to, really. I could say more. I could express more. But everything I have talked about Star Swirl, about being out of date, about the pattern, about its manifesting throughout the course of Equestria, everything is emphasized by that single sentence. Because in modern Equestria, yeah, you can settle this difficulty. You can save your homeland with a conversation. They've done it before. Twilight, of course, says nothing. Listen, Evo. Friendship is worthless. Only the fools and the weak... Sorry, I slipped into stupid there for a second. My friends are my power. I don't know about you all. That is why Equestria is awesome. I agree, Tree Whisperer. Starlight starts showcasing his contrast to Star Swirl here. I keep comparing and contrasting Starlight to Star Swirl because the two of them are the best foils to each other in this episode. And the simplest way to explain that is Starlight has learned the lesson Star Swirl never did. Whether he never had a chance to, or never he bothered to, that's debatable. But one way or the other, he never learned that lesson that she, well, came very close to not learning in the suicide episode we've already discussed. Starlight is also the one who points out the obvious. The map calls people to solve friendship problems. The map doesn't say, hey, here's the villain. The map says, there's a friendship problem here. So, oh, this is when the sirens start. This is when we find out about Stygian. Stygian is such an awesome concept. You're right, S.A. Ross. I absolutely love Stygian as an idea. It's something that fiction doesn't touch on as much as I wish it did. You could be a great front center in a sports team. You can be a great soldier in an army, or a hero, or a pilot, or whatever. But you are junk unless someone who has a brain and knowledge and skill is coordinating and calculating and being the tactician. That's true for an office, or a restaurant, or a military, or a sports team, or an art project, or a school. That is just pretty much a universal truth. You need someone, or someone's, doesn't have to be one person, who has the brain and the coordination and just the mind to keep all those little pieces together and operating how they should. Stygian is that, to a T, and they showcase this fantastically. I love the way they just show this. I love the way that they get across this idea. What? I'm actually not familiar with that one, the Dead Unicorn show. I mean, I think it could have been a lot worse, Triaxia, but that's okay. We'll see that in the new show, I'm sure. When does that new movie come out? Isn't that soon? So Stygian's awesome. This is fantastic. He's got the keen mind and all this wonderful fun stuff. But this is when... Oh, that is soon. I knew that was pretty soon. This is when we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. This episode has one flaw to it, in my opinion. Only one. And that flaw is the fact that the episode leaves it a little bit too vague as to what actually happened. And for a situation this nuanced, you need details to judge. Is this Stygian's fault? Is it their fault? Is it both? Is it all on Star Swirl? Who had a conversation with whom at what time? Who said what to whom? We don't know any of those details. And that, I think, is the biggest flaw of the episode. The episode does not give us the details necessary to properly judge this situation. What we know is that Stygian took the artifacts to do a spell to help things out, and things are cool, but they weren't cool, so he gets banished by his friends, and because he's been cast out by his friends, he goes to the... what's it called? I actually wrote it down. I swear I wrote it down. The Well of Shade. Gives in to despair, disharmony, the pattern of disharmony. Somnambula gives up on yada yada yada. So we don't know the specifics, and that is a flaw. I'm not sure if it's going to drag it down, but I do want to mention it because it is the worst part of the episode. All we know, the only facts we know, is that Stygian procured artifacts. Stygian wanted to do spell on artifacts to help out and be part of the team. They cast him out. There's probably a gap in between those two events. And then Stygian went off and became the Pony of Shadows after giving in to disharmony. Cool. So that sucks. I wrote down Star Swirl's character traits as I was going through it. He's a know-it-all, which makes sense. People who are very experienced tend to come across as know-it-all. I do that from time to time, and I don't mean to. He is very dismissive of anything that is not within his understanding or purview. He is extremely self-important. So he also reminds me of Illidan. Not completely. In fact, in many ways, Illidan is actually the inverse of Star Swirl the Bearded. Because where Star Swirl was completely stuck in his ways, Illidan was the exact opposite. Illidan was incredibly adaptive and would constantly change his operational procedures and his mentality based on the developing situation. But other than that, you can kind of see the similarities there. These are traits that usually are held by someone who is an anti-hero, someone who is a good person, or rather, is trying to do good without really being a good person. Anyways, 6 minutes before the episode ends, the Pony of Shadow shows up. So that's interesting. I do like how they throw up the shield before they even start talking. This is interesting in its own right. This is when I'm going to bring up Luna again. There's this place called the Well of Shade, which is just... there's so much implied there. And the darkness reached out to him and welcomed him when he felt abandoned by his friends. And God, doesn't that sound familiar? Luna! Excuse me. Right? And the darkness embraced him and gave him more power. Blah, 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 blah. And I just bring this up again because I really hope they touch on this at some point in the future. This is also even mentioned after this, because while the Pony of Shadows is banished, Stygian is not at the end of the episode. The two are shown to be distinct entities. By the way, side note, you notice how I made you remember earlier that the spell that Star Swirl the Bearded was developing, which Twilight eventually used and perfected, was the one that turned her into an alicorn. Stygian's a unicorn who, when he gives in to darkness, becomes an alicorn. Seriously, he has all the traits of it. He's got the horn, he's got the wings, and he's got the flowing mane thing going on, the mane and tail. Anyways. And the strength, yeah, and the raw power. Sorry, that should be mentioned as well. I don't know how intentional that is, but it's just something interesting to bring up. I do think, so I can only speculate in a vacuum because the episode doesn't touch on it, but I do firmly think that there is a connection between the darkness, the disharmony, whatever you want to call it, and Nightmare Moon. We'll see if that ever comes up. I don't anticipate it will. So he broken, lost. This is when I mentioned the Alicorn thing. Starlight says to Twilight, "Are you still sure this isn't a friendship problem?" But this is when the episode nails it. This is when the episode gets that extra oomph that I'm going to argue qualifies it for purple status. Because it's already a red, but I think this scene pushes it to purple. Starlight has been shown in contrast to Starswirl both episodes, and the two characters have been bouncing off each other almost continuously. Every time it's been brought up, it's been a theological, or not theological, a theoretical, a mentality, a philosophical battle between the mentality of Starlight and the mentality of Starswirl. And I've already compared and contrasted them too as we've been discussing these two episodes. But then the episode decides to compare and contrast Twilight to Starswirl in just 2 seconds. They're pushing the Pony of Shadows into limbo, banishing him. And Stygian pokes out, and Twilight says, "Oh my god, there's a pony in there," and without hesitation dives in after him. That so beautifully and wonderfully contrasts Twilight to Starswirl. That is why she is who she is, and why he is not. I have a quote I'd like to share with you, because this is the distinction, in a simple way to put it. Would you rather see 10 guilty men go free to ensure one innocent one goes free? Or would you rather 10 innocent people be punished to ensure one guilty gets punished? Pick one. And that is the contrast between Twilight and Starswirl. Starswirl would punish 10 people who are innocent to ensure the guilty gets punished. Twilight would let 10 guilty people go to ensure that the innocent does not get punished. That is the distinction. And as I've already mentioned, it's understandable why Starswirl is that way. Because the realm used to kind of suck. But it's also understandable why Twilight is that way, because it doesn't anymore. Someone like Twilight is needed in this particular era, because she is the kind of person who will actually reach out to someone when they need it, even when it's dangerous, risky, and arguably stupid. And so she does what she did to Starlight. She reaches out to Stygian. No one ever noticed me. No one ever noticed what I did. I didn't have any special powers or strength. The darkness welcomed me when no one else would. I actually wrote in my notes the phrase anti-pattern, but I think I like the term disharmony better. And I'm going to start using that, assuming this shows up in the future. Please don't spoil. This is when he shares his version of the story, and this is when the flaw I've already pointed out comes up, so we'll just move past this really quick. We have some like symmetry here, because Twilight alone couldn't overpower the Pony of Shadows, but combined they could, just like the previous time. And this is when Stygian is separated from the Pony of Shadows. Luna connection will probably never come up again. Please don't spoil. Now, I actually lied. There's one other flaw to this episode, but I was almost willing to give it a pass because the overwhelming majority of My Little Pony episodes, and frankly television in general, has this problem. Oh, the threat's over. So let's wrap this up too quickly. Starswirl goes from being a dick to just an immediate change in mentality, or an immediate change in attitude. And I think that is a mistake. Having him change his mind to help save Stygian, sure, that makes sense. New information given, new operational procedure done. Sure, I'm with that. But he stops being a dick. And he was a dick the whole episode. Frankly, he should still be a dick, just, okay, clearly I've got some stuff to learn. That's my take on it. But instead, his attitude changes in addition to his mentality, and I think it should have been just the one. So that's another flaw. I do like the idea of the pillars traveling the land. I'm sure that'll never come up again. Please don't spoil. And the episode wraps up. And before we cut off and before we review this, I do have to make a point here. The movie happens right after this. The movie I've already reviewed. I've said this before, but after rewatching and analyzing this episode, I am now more convinced than ever that that movie does not fit after season 7. Now, I said that even just on the face of it. I said that even just regardless of analysis or whatever. But going straight from this episode and everything that happens in this episode to, oh, by the way, here's the movie. And here's the Thunder King and his stupid marauding band of dumb. What? This... I've been praising both of these episodes quite a bit because there's lots of little details that add to the flavor. Those little bits of continuity and world building and logic. I've pointed that out in both of these episodes, and they're all over the place and they're awesome. Going from this to the movie is the exact opposite of that, and that's one of the reasons why people tend to accuse me in a negative fashion of being a nitpicker. Because when you lack those little extra tidbits, the whole thing is lacking. It is the exact flipped thing, right? Like Popanix right here, who is awesome, by the way. Thank you very much. I'll put that towards contradiction in just a moment. This here is a positive, but its absence is a negative. There's no in-between. There's no neutral, right? If you have these little details, it adds to it. If you don't, it detracts from it. And so going from this and then making the logical jump to the movie makes so little sense because all those little details are absent and it is detracted. I actually like the movie less right now than I did about 30 minutes ago or 50 minutes ago, whatever. And yes, I know the movie was written well before. I understand how that works. I looked at the behind the scenes. I get it. It's just, once again, the movie would have fit so much better if it happened all the way back in season 2. Now, where's my notes? Because I need to write down that thing for contradiction. There it is. No, I didn't notice that Imperial Star Destroyer. So I suppose I'm a moron. So that's all I have to say about this episode. It sucks! That's actually not true. We have 2 more things to talk about. How do we review it? How do we rate it? How do we make the elements work? Dark blue. I've already given away my thought on this one. The wonderful character building, the awesome little moments that didn't have to be there, the nuance, the details, the continuity, the logic. It's even thematically significant. The fact that Star Swirl is better than just being a typical one-dimensional asshole, which is a problem that a lot of fiction falls into. You know, BioWare has like the designated you're supposed to hate them character. I've talked about this before. Same concept. No, they don't fall into that trope. The animation. Oh god, the animation. Twilight actually learns a lesson. Starlight is significant other than just being strong. There's a little bit of a scene for everyone, you know? Like, there's just a purple. Oh my gosh. So that means this is the first purple for Nicole DeBouc, however you pronounce that. And, getting back to Haber over here, our 4th purple for Josh Haber. Wow. That's impressive. Usually the series likes to focus on darkness being evil forever, since disharmony is clearly being replaced. If you replaced the word darkness with the word disharmony, it would fit 1-to-1. So, anyways, before we cut off, we do have one last thing to talk about. It's the very last thing. Now, most of you already know this. Pretty much everyone already knows this. I haven't seen past this point. I am not completely blind. I have had very minor, incredibly minor things spoiled for me when I was. So I watched this on Amazon. That's the method I use, and it auto played as I was jotting down my notes, and so I know the next episode has to do with a school. That's it. That's about as much as I know about season 8 and season 9. But we're going to be nice and blind going into season 8 and season 9. I'm actually really looking forward to it and simultaneously really nervous, because one thing that tends to be historically true is shows do one of two things when it comes to their final runs. They either get much better or much worse. And there's generally not a lot of in between on that when it comes to fiction. Like, watch every Star Trek series and you can kind of see what I mean by that. So we'll see. We will see. But that'll be starting, of course, next week. Let me double check something really quick. So yes, next week there will be... We're not interrupting Lore Weeks or Streaminations. The dad visit and possibly the consultation visit do not happen on Sundays, so we're cool on that. So I hope you've enjoyed. We will obviously not be streaming tomorrow, but we will be streaming Banjo-Tooie starting this Tuesday, so I do hope to see at least some of you there. So let me jump off the local recording.